Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest in my Duelyst series, produced in partnership with Counterplay Games. And today, we're going to look a bit more at the reveals for the Denizens of Shim'zar expansion, which is coming out very, very soon, so super excited about that. And we've already went over quite a few of the cards already, but as the reveals have sort of been trickling in, I want to catch up on what I missed so far. So let's jump right in. First, we have another of what I have in many cases called difficult to evaluate, the battle pets. Ion, a 2/3 ranged battle pet for 3 that deals double damage to generals. This is a card that is even more difficult to evaluate than some of the other battle pets because of the fact that it's ranged, and it specifically has a double damage ability that wants to target a very specific thing. So exactly the behavior of a ranged battle pet is even kind of less clear than the normal sort of melee ones, because is this going to still move toward the opposing minions? Is it going to sort of sit back and attack? And if it just sits back and attacks whatever is sort of closest, or if it just sits back and attacks the opposing general, those are both kind of interesting things, just because the fact that it has ranged means it gets to avoid a lot of the potential pitfalls of your battle pets just kind of charging across and getting themselves killed, which is kind of what I imagine most battle pets to do. It's kind of mindlessly, I don't know, they're like the Rickons in the world. But anyway, this is a card that, I think that could potentially find a home in decks that are just looking for ranged minions. There's certain density of ranged effects that some of those decks might want if they're trying to play with things that boost their ranged minions, or just generally, not all factions have access to Widowmaker or whatever, the Songhai 2/3 ranged for 3. So again, very difficult to evaluate just based on not necessarily understanding very clearly the mechanics of how battle pets will work, but that's definitely something that will be more clear as the expansion comes out and we have a chance to actually play with them. So jury's out in this, in my mind, but it does have potential. Then we have the Calculator. This is an interesting card because it really wants you to play a bunch of battle pets. This is very obviously, something that's encouraging you to build a battle pet deck. And we've seen a couple other cards in that vein, and we've seen a handful of battle pets, some faction specific, some neutral, and I think that we may actually have sufficient density of them that a card like this could actually be super powerful, because you just have a bunch of overstated battle pets in your deck. As to whether the deck itself is powerful built around this card, my guess is that the battle pets won't be super strong, but if there is a deck that does contain lots of battle pets, the reason it might be strong, I think, might be this. It's obviously very vulnerable to any kind of dispel effect, but could potentially give you a big explosive minion early in the game if you have a handful of overstated pets. So interesting, and certainly a card that I expect people to build decks around. My guess is that it probably won't turn it to be super competitive, but I know I'll try it. All right, Lurking Fear. This is an Abyssian spell that lowers the cost of all minions with Dying Wish in your action bar and deck by 1. This is kind of like the Backstab one that we saw in Songhai, except this affects the cards in your deck as well. Obviously, it doesn't have the Backstab boost, the other one, the +1/+1 to those minions, but this can allow you to sort of ramp out to big Dying Wish minions a lot faster. And there's some pretty powerful Dying Wish minions that do exist in Abyssian. Is that worth spending a card to do and sort of losing tempo on the board because you're not actually playing minions onto the board? Maybe. There's things like Reaper and the what's the Celerity guy? I never remember the name of some of them. Vorpal Revenant, Spectral Revenant. I just know him as the Celerity guy who explodes into Racelings. But there's obviously some very, very powerful Dying Wish minions in Abyssian. And one thing that's worth noting is that Abyssian is a class that has Rite of the Undervault, which allows you to redraw your hand. And if you're able to get off multiple copies of Lurking Fear, you can potentially Rite of the Undervault, get a bunch of Dying Wish minions that may or may not be 1 or 0 cost, things like Jaxies and stuff like that, and just be able to keep playing out a ton of these onto the board. So this is definitely a card to keep your eye on, because it has potential, even if it feels like it's sort of negative tempo play because it's not actually putting anything on the board. It can be very, very powerful, especially because it affects all of your future Dying Wish minions, and it's not interactable by your opponent. So I know I'll be trying this one out at some point. So Ghost Azalea. This is +1 attack for each friendly shadow creep, as if shadow creeps didn't have enough reasons for you to want to spread them everywhere. But obviously a very powerful card in the event that you're able to generate a significant amount of creep. Just one Shadow Nova, which is much easier to play now, just costs 4 mana, will make this as powerful as Adamantium Claws. And it seems like, oh wow, it's super strong, but Adamantium Claws are just automatically this strong to begin with. So if you're looking to think it could be a big finisher in your Shadow Creep deck, there's already Obliterate that's available. And if you're looking for interaction, well, a lot of the sort of tools in Shadow Creep naturally allow you to do that. So my feeling is that this is not likely to be a super strong card, just because you're paying a lot for what is questionably a powerful effect. It's not going to be useful early in the game, and later in the game it feels like there's probably more powerful things you can do. So it looks super strong, I think, and it can definitely wow people with the numbers that it can generate in single attacks from your Abyssian general, but I don't think it's likely to be a cornerstone of the Shadow Creep decks. All right, Lyonar spell, After Blaze, a 3-cost spell, give a minion +2/+4. If it has Zeal, draw a card. This, I think, is a pretty strong card. One of the things that a lot of Lyonar decks want is sort of the ability to trade up with their minions. One of the reasons that I think a lot of the Xeron decks aren't necessarily as effective is because you don't have the roar effect in order to actually allow you to attack up the curve with some of your smaller minions. It's naturally pretty powerful. And this not only allows you to attack up the curve with your minion by giving it plus attack, but also gives it plus health, which makes it more likely that it can survive combat with an opposing minion, and then you can heal it, which is very strong. So I think that After Blaze has a lot of potential to see play, especially in Xeron decks. You know, it's obviously super, super strong on a Suntide Maiden, turning it into a 5/10. You draw a card, you can start, using all sorts of healing effects with it. Very, very strong, and I really am looking forward to building decks using this card. All right, Solarius, a 3/3 for 6. Kind of pathetic sounding, right? But Zeal, draw 2 additional cards at the end of your turn. This is an interesting card because by itself, it's obviously not a particularly powerful body, but it immediately refills you and gives you additional resources. And if you're able to protect it, which is something that Lyonar decks will often have tools to do with lots of big provokes, it can continue to feed you those resources every turn. A lot of Lyonar decks do feel like they kind of run out of gas. They don't have quite enough oomph from their individual cards, and they kind of peter out toward the end of the game. And just, a single turn with this in play, it obviously replaces itself and then some, and your opponent's forced to deal with it. And that's something that can sort of snowball if your opponent can't immediately remove it. And in a lot of cases, there's a lot of premium removal targets in your deck. People don't want to just get blown up by an Ironcliff Guardian, and if they're forced to use some sort of removal effect on a Solarius, they might not have anything left for the Ironcliff Guardian that it drew you into. So it is definitely a card that has a major trade-off because it's very, very weak on the board for its actual size, but drawing you 2 additional cards each turn can really get you a significant additional resource advantage and might be enough to pull you ahead into a victory. So certainly a powerful card potentially for controlling Lyonar style decks, but I feel like it's likely that it won't be as strong as some of the other late game sort of finisher cards that have immediate board presence and also give you sort of resource advantage like the new legendary spell. All right, a Magmar card. This is an exciting one to me. The Molokai Huntress. It is just a 1/2, but it has grow +1/+1, and friendly minions grow at the start of both players' turns. So this is obviously sweet in a deck with a bunch of other grow minions. And we've seen a lot of cards kind of like this that want you to play more decks of a kind of thing. We have the Lurking Fear for Abyssian Dying Wish. We have the Backstab card that we saw in Songhai. There's lots of things that encourage you to play extra structures, obelisk desks, or whatever I was saying in the last video. And it's not just cherry picking whatever the best, most efficient minions are and having sort of more focus and trying to have more synergy-based stuff rather than just raw power. And being able to get your guys growing immediately can get them out of range of larger opposing things and can really get you sort of, you're rolling very quickly. I think the actual stats of this, when the turn you first play it, it's just a 1/2, then a 2/3. If your opponent doesn't kill it, immediately becomes a 3/4. Obviously, that's pretty powerful. by the start of your turn, but it's super vulnerable to Chromatic Cold and any kind of Dispel effect, because not only do you lose the bonus effect on your other minions, but it also just goes down to a 1/2 itself. So as much as I want to like this card, because I feel like it pushes an interesting direction for Magmar, my inclination is not quite strong enough to encourage enough of the other Grow minions to see play, and is really vulnerable itself. So I think it's a neat card, but I don't think it has a ton of potential. All right, Mirror Meld, a Songhai spell to summon a copy of a friendly minion that costs 2 or less nearby. This is a powerful spell with any kind of buff effects. Anything that you can do to increase the power on your 2-cost minion, because it doesn't care about its attack, it just cares about the cost. And if it works anything like Fractal Replication, the Magmar spell, it gives you a copy of the minion with all of its current qualities. So say you have a 2-cost guy and you put Killing Edge on it twice, and then you Mirror Meld it. It's like, well, now you have a double Killing Edged Mirror Melded guy that is obviously going to be super powerful in terms of the value you're getting off of it. So this definitely feels like it would fit into a buff-heavy Songhai strategy. As to whether that's something that is likely to be a powerful deck, feels like most likely not, though we do see a lot of use of Killing Edge already, and this can also just give you an extra Jaxi or whatever else, but it's by itself a very weak card at various stages of the game, because you might just not have a target for it. You draw it late in the game when you just don't have a 2-cost minion, so maybe problematic. If it might be at its best in a Reva deck, because at bare minimum you can copy a Heartseeker from your Bloodborne spell, so the fail case is really low. And also that's the kind of deck that's going to want to have a bunch of buffs for your ranged minions anyway, so could have a home there, but certainly not going to be a staple card in Songhai decks. All right, I don't know how to pronounce this exactly. Hyo, Exho, I don't know. But anyway, the 2/3 Battle Pet with Dying Wish, put a random Songhai spell in your action bar that costs 1 less. There are a lot of really powerful Songhai spells like Heaven's Eclipse, but this can give you a lot of terrible things too. You can end up getting an Ancestral Divination, you can end up getting just things that don't necessarily have impact in the way that you have your particular deck structured. Obviously, there are a lot of Songhai decks that are really spell intensive, and almost any spell can be useful to you. And that's obviously pretty great, and potentially Zo could fit into those decks. But there's also the point that, it's a battle pet, not really reliable as a minion, and in particular, not especially reliable as a 2-drop minion to contest Mana Spring tiles, which I brought up in the last video, which I think is one of the biggest strikes against these cards, is that they are not really able to count against your curve in terms of the primary function of those early drops. So it could potentially find a home in a sort of spell-heavy Songhai deck that just wants some additional value from its body that turns into a spell that's worth something later on. But I feel like it's not likely to really have a huge impact like the other battle pets as far as being the 2-drop curve filler, just because of the Mana Spring problem. All right, now this is a really weird card. Cone of Horns. Songhai legendary spell that transforms all minions in your action bar deck into 0-cost Gore Horns, and you draw 3 cards. Now, I don't really know what you want to do with this. It's just kind of hilarious to me. Maybe you're playing a deck that has, just a bunch of, I don't know, just minions that you just want to be Gore Horns. Maybe you just really fantasize about going to Spain for the running of the bulls, and you decided to play this card instead. It's really hard to evaluate this card because it does such a bizarre thing. But drawing 3 cards up front is obviously reasonably powerful effect. And the fact that every minion is now a 0-cost Gorehorn, which means that it's going to have an immediate game impact because, well, you can play anything that you draw that's a minion as a Gorehorn. As to whether a bunch of Gorehorns is really what you want when you get to the late game, you get to 8 mana and you're like, all right, Gorehorns galore, Gorehorns for everyone. Or at least for me, because I got all these Gorehorns, how do I hold them all? I don't know if that's really going to be the case, but Gorehorn's obviously very powerful with a lot of things that Songhai does, like inner focus and teleporting around so you can backstab people with them and grow and whatnot. So maybe there's a way to really take advantage of this, but it has not come to mind for me just yet. So all I really envision is the running of the bulls with a bunch of Gorehorns running around. It's just really funny to me. So that's my thoughts on this card. Last, and certainly not least, but kind of hard act to follow with the Cone of Horns, Frostiva. This is a Vanar card that has Force Field, 3/3 for 5, so weak stats, but Force Field obviously pretty good. And whenever it attacks or is attacked, it summons a 3/3 Vesper Night Howler nearby. So itself not a Vesper minion, so it doesn't necessarily pair with the Vesper decks in the way that you might want naturally, but can summon Vesper minions itself. So obviously, if your opponent doesn't clear this immediately, and sometimes you're just going to get, if they clear it with attack, you get 2 3/3s, which is obviously quite powerful. You're effectively getting 3 3/3s for 5 mana, bare minimum. And if you're pairing this potentially in a Kara deck, it becomes much, much more difficult for them to get rid of, because this body by itself can be significantly bigger. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately for the rest of us, the Night Howlers themselves don't get buffed by the Kara Bloodborne spell. But this is a card that has the potential to generate significant value if it is able to stay in play for any length of time, which is obviously very, very strong because it's immediately generating not only value to your hand, but this value of actually just placing these minions in play. So it kind of feels a little bit like the Pandora, or I forget the name of the card, the new one that makes the 2/2s nearby, who's the 4/6 with Provoke. Regardless, an individual body that can generate multiple potential threats, and the fact that it has Force Field means that damage-based removal is difficult to use on it as a way to actually get rid of it without giving your opponent some amount of value. So definitely a card that I have my eye on because it's the style of card that I really like, just a value-generating minion. So I'll certainly try to see what I can do with it, whether I'm reactivating it and just kind of making tons of guys and Spirit of the Wilding and sending them all in too. We'll see, but neat card. So that is it for my review of Denizens of Shim'zar. I'm sure there's more cards that have come out since I recorded this. Just have to have a chance to look at them when they actually are released. So very excited for that. Definitely going to be playing quite a bit with the new set. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.